I think one of the most intriguing games to be announced during Nintendo Switch reveal was the third-party game Project Octopath Traveler, developed by Square Enix. At this point, we really don't know much about the project considering we've only been given like a 40-second teaser, so there's not a huge amount to speculate on. What we do know though is that the game is being produced by Tomoya Asano, the man responsible for Bravely Default. For those who don't know, Bravely Default was a turn-based JRPG that came out for the 3DS and was met with unexpected success both critically and commercially. Well, at least the success was unexpected to Square Enix, as they later released a statement explaining their shift in mindset towards traditional JRPGs. After I finished Bravely Default myself, my first thought was how cool it would be if the same team worked on a new IP for Nintendo's next home console. And hey, what do you know? Although it may or may not be the majority of the team returning, we at least know that the lead designer is at the wheel. We also know that there will be a returning artist. I actually made a mistake in my Switch reveal video where I said that Akihiko Yoshida, the lead artist for Bravely Default, was returning based on this drawing. But this drawing is actually done by Naoki Ikushima, who was a background and monster art designer for the game. At first glance, I just assumed it was Yoshida based on how similar the art style is, until I found Ikushima's signature at the top right hand corner. So that's basically all we know about the team so far. As for the game itself, there are a few very interesting things to take away from this trailer. The first is something I'm sure most people have already noted, and that's the art style. It's a mix of 2D sprites and 3D environments, which is ironically almost the opposite of what Bravely Default was. This is probably one of the most unique looking games I've seen in a while, not only for its use of pixel art, but for its interesting use of lighting. I'd imagine that having a simplistic art style like this gives room for the developers to play around with certain elements that would otherwise be too demanding, and that's exactly what they've done here. All three scenes shown so far are drenched in strong and prominent lighting effects. In the first scene, you can see individual rays of light shining in both the foreground and the background, and all the character sprites are being illuminated by the sunlight, so they seem like they're really part of the environment. The cave scene does a really nice job at showing off the detail. You can see the light from the player's lantern bouncing off the overhanging rocks in the foreground as she walks by. The cliff face beside her almost looks like it's glittering because different pieces of it are lighting up more than others, based on the angle they're facing relative to the lamp. You can see the character's shadow expand as it curves around the structure of the rock. You can see the torch over here is casting a shadow of its own stand, but as the player with the lamp approaches, the shadow is diffused by the new light source and is replaced by a new, actively moving shadow of the torch's base. And as she gets farther away, the original shadow slowly returns. But the coolest part has to be when she walks onto the bridge. You can actually see the light shining through the cracks in between the individual boards and hitting the rock face under them. In the next scene, there's this ominous mist floating around, but it's darker in the foreground than it is in the background, adding depth to the whole scene. The cool part is when Buddy over here gears up to use his fire magic. The scene goes dark for a moment before the whole surrounding area is engulfed in this bright orange and white light. And it's not just one flat lighting effect, it's this prominent flickering that makes the whole thing so aesthetically pleasing to look at. And you can see that the only one not being hit by the flame's light is this guy over here because he's standing in the other guy's shadow, but his sword is still catching the light because of where he's holding it. Like I said before, because they've gone with a very simplistic art style, setting up lighting like this is a lot easier. But the important thing here is that it looks fantastic and it adds this really nice sense of depth to the whole thing. I have a feeling that this game is very far away from being completed, so I don't know how much of this is subject to change, but I really hope that they keep these dominant lighting effects intact because it's incredibly nice to look at. In a visual sense, the game seems to be shaping up quite nicely, but the thing that really got my attention was the hinting at an open-ended style, particularly when the announcer says,
"Every road is yours to take."
Bravely Default was a linear-style JRPG with its focus on the narrative, but from what's being implied, it seems like this could potentially be a game that's more fixated on the adventure aspect of RPGs. I have no idea what kind of form that's gonna take, whether it's branching character stories or just a straight-out open-world experience, but the thing that's certain is that they're really trying to sell the idea of one big connected world. The thing that best exemplifies this is this awesome world map that they show you at the beginning of the trailer, and when I saw this map, map, the first game that popped into my head was the MMO RuneScape. Say what you want about RuneScape, but you could not walk for 10 seconds in any direction without finding something of significance. There was always an item to find, a person to talk to, a cave to explore. By no means was RuneScape that big of a game compared to other MMOs, but it was absolutely packed to the brim with things to discover. When I look at the map for Octopath Traveler, I see something very similar. Regardless of whether or not this is the entire map we're seeing, the game doesn't seem like it's going to be that big in comparison to others in the same genre. When it zooms into the next scene here, you can get a general idea of what size this town is going to be in relation to the rest of the world. But the cool thing isn't its size, but all the points of interest spread across the map. There's a huge amount of geographic diversity from what we're seeing, and every place seems to have its own unique and fantasy-like quirks. Looking through it all really gets the imagination going, whether you're looking at the Land of the Lost Souls, Skullburn Cave, or the Path of Knowledge. Also, there's quite a few points of interest that show up in the body of water, like the Whirl of Doom, and it hints at the game having at least some focus on being at sea. Everything here makes it look like a world that's meant to be explored in a non-linear manner, based on all the twisting and winding paths and the multiple entranceways into each one of the villages. Additionally, there's a very good chance that there could be a day and night cycle in place. Both the first scene and the third scene seem to be taken in the same village, but at different times of day. On top of that, in the first scene, you can see the same torch stands that are used to light up the surrounding area in the other shots. Considering the way they're creating very interesting and unique lighting effects throughout this game, it certainly seems plausible that they'd create another way to show that off some more. All in all, this looks like a world that's built for adventure, and if they spend the time to actually fill this world with interesting things to find, then this could potentially be a sleeper hit for the Switch. Although there really is no way of telling for sure whether or not this is the game that it seems to be, it's at least proving to be a project with a lot of potential based on the concepts being presented and based on the guy who's heading up the whole project. I'm pretty excited to see more from Octopath Traveler, and I'm interested to see how it shapes up in the coming months. I feel like this is something I want to continually cover, so hopefully we get to see some more of it at E3 in June. Until then, I'll be here waiting.